terminology of community of practice. I worked in the development sector for about 10 years, and it is second nature to most of us to use acronyms that are confusing to everybody, because that's kind of what we do in our sector. But the actual talk is about collaboration. So first, let me just tell you, a community of practice is a really simple thing. It's basically, you take a community, which is you and I. We are part of a community, and we focus on a single issue, which is what we call a practice. So a community of practice is nothing other than a collaborative platform. And it's something that is not only for the development sector. In my background, working on projects around sanitation, HIV, or any of those issues. Why do we call it a community of practice and not just collaboration? It's easier to get funded for things when you come up with words that seem more technical than they need to be. So that is the truth, and this is where it is. So what is this talk really about? And in 10 minutes, it's hard for me to sort of condense everything, but it is this understanding that we all need to be working together to be solving problems that require a large amount of effort for scale. And that is really where I think we're all kind of gearing towards. I think all the speakers today talked a lot about why it is important to work together. But why I called it a vaccine and the cure, primarily because it's a nice hook and it kind of works. And I do have a writing background. So for me, that was the way I thought I could get people to at least pay attention beyond the first minute of this 10-minute conversation and continue it. But it actually has a nuance to it. So in the sectors we work in and everything we do, what a vaccine is nothing but a prevention to avoid the problem, right? So if you really think about it, take HIV, which I've worked in before. The prevention side of it would be looking at condoms, reproductive safety, health, all of that would be what we call prevention. If you look at diabetes, it would be exercise and everything to do with that. The cure, of course, in the same analogy for HIV would be the triple cocktail or the AZT drugs that actually take care of a problem. In diabetes, again, it would be exercise or at least insulin injections would be your cure. Both of these things for the longest time in any sector, people have been working on it at least as separate pillars. So most people or organizations work on one side of the problem. And I think this exists in anything we do beyond just the development sector. It exists in the corporate sector and everywhere else. So why I think collaboration is both the vaccine and the cure is there is a continuum between the two pillars that needs to be recognized. And once you recognize that, then what ends up happening is you're able to solve the problem in a much more effective manner. Can any single organization actually only work on the prevention side or the cure and actually achieve scale? No, it's really not possible. So part of what a community of practice is trying to do is say, look, we need to connect the dots, but we need to do it in a more effective manner for us to understand that individual success is no longer a metric that works for solving any of the problems that we face, not just in India, but around the world. So what I'm going to try to do in a very short time, in 10 minutes, is trying to explain why this is critical and how to do it. And also to kind of highlight in our everyday work and everyday lives, where do you see collaboration when you don't even recognize it? So the first example I'll tell you where you see it, but you may not understand the extent of it, is in filmmaking. I've had the privilege of working as part of the writing team on 2 movies, English Vinglish and Dear Zindagi. I'd never written before for a screenplay or anything, but I had the opportunity. So what I ended up doing was working as part of a writing team. Now, what's interesting about filmmaking is, and I would request everybody who's on this talk, the next time you watch a film, next time you see a TV show, please wait till the end credits. Because what that allows you to see is the number of people who put in the effort, who were required to create the one product that you're going to remember for a long time. If you liked the movie or hated it, you need to know there were 150 people behind it, not just the big stars' names or whoever you wanted to see there. It took a collective effort. So in general, you see collaboration around you every day. And to understand it in a filmmaking perspective, what was interesting is there's the same process that we have in any of the development sector work we do, which is there's a shared vision, you have a leader, And success or failure is really on everybody's back. It isn't one person responsible for it failing or not. And I know sometimes it eventually comes down to one or two things, but it's never that. It's a very long process. The second example, coming from the work I've done in around HIV and sanitation, again, if you look at it from a vaccine or a cure perspective, in sanitation, generally, when you look at construction of a toilet, that is actually a prevention, right? So you're trying to stop people from open defecating. Why? Because that doesn't contaminate the environment. So if you build a toilet for somebody, they're not contaminating the environment. You then reduce stunting, which is basically contaminated water. And the cure is the treatment of that waste. So what happens once you flush takes it forward to saying, okay, in a continuum or a value chain, this is where the model has to work. Again, this cannot work in silos, right? So a lot of times what was happening was people would just say, let's work on one problem or the other. Now what we're realizing is there is no way to solve either of these. So keep in mind that collaboration has to be something that is going to function around both of these ideas and aspects. The third, which I think is what we're seeing right now, and you're seeing it actively take place, is around COVID. Now, I never came up with a title of vaccine and a cure to think I have a cure for any vaccine or anything to do with COVID. But the analogy worked well because what you're seeing right now is a partnership between the government and the public, where we're trying to be informed about what does it take to solve a problem collectively for all of us. Now, the second part of this talk is going to be around how do you collaborate? What does it actually mean to be part of a collaborative network or a community of practice? The first thing I'll tell you is it is not a passive process. To be a part of a collaborative or a community of practice, you need to actively want to engage. Why is that important? Because then there's accountability. Now, you ask anybody in any room, would you like to collaborate? Everyone's going to raise their hands. The problem with that is, are you raising your hand to be accountable? Or are you raising your hand just to say, I know I have to say yes to this problem? Please don't be a passive collaborator because that is not part of what we do to solve a much larger problem in the world, right? Second, collaboration requires communication across all three aspects of what we're trying to do here, right? To solve the problem, to identify the problem, and look at challenges, okay? The second very important part about collaborative models or communities of practice is inclusivity. So when you choose to collaborate, please always keep in mind you need to have inclusivity and diversity. I will give you two examples where the consequence of not having diversity and inclusivity in trying to solve a problem has had consequences is, one is seatbelts. Back in the day, seatbelts were designed without keeping women in mind as drivers. So a lot of the accidents, first time when people were driving with seatbelts, the model was designed for men. So accidents where women were drivers, they were having much higher incidence of fatalities and deaths because we just did not involve women in the design process of a seatbelt. Second, I will tell you, even menstrual hygiene products. Back in the day, 1930s, 40s, when you design menstrual hygiene products, be it a sanitary napkin, a tampon, it was men predominantly deciding what is it that is good for somebody else. And you would have maybe companies working together to do this, but mostly they were just individually doing it. But the inclusivity part is critical for any collaborative model to really work. The third is keeping very straight and very simple goals in mind. We all know we are trying to solve problems that are very large in the world. So if you want to solve a problem like sanitation or HIV or even climate change, it seems like such a big goal that you kind of get caught up in the weeds and thinking, oh my God, I'll just be a part of a group, but I don't think we're going to solve it. So keep in mind, if you have a North Star that you want to solve a problem, break it down into 10 different parts, and then let each group, each part of your collaborative, which is now inclusive, be able to identify where they can play a role. Because a community of practice or a collaborative model only works when each of us can leverage what we know is our strength. I may not be good in implementing something, but I may be very good in communicating the problem. So that is very key to keep in mind. And I think even the talks we had about with the urban design a planner from the previous session talked about that. How do you get people to be involved and identify where they can actually work towards solving this problem? The fourth is obviously you need to think from your own perspective as an organization, as an individual. You are not responsible for solving the problem. What you are responsible for is playing your part in solving the problem. And when you know that, it becomes a little simpler to identify how strong your role can be and where you want to actually take this a little further to achieve, be it sustainable development goals or in any sector. It can be even the corporate sector, but that is where collaborative platforms really are the key. There is no silver bullet. We are in 2020, we see it is odd to talk about collaboration when we're all kind of thinking we're isolated, right? But we're not really isolated. It is actually, we're just having to have a different mechanism through which we operate to collaborate, right? So that's where we need to keep those things in mind. And all of those points will actually help you design a roadmap that says, okay, if I want to work on a problem, how do I ensure that I know there are 4 or 5 different parts of the problem: communication, implementation, identifying challenges, all of that. Now, keep in mind, it is very easy to agree with collaborating. What is the issue when you collaborate? Number one, decision-making takes a lot longer. So when you're an individual or an individual organization, you have one goal in mind. It could be, or a corporation, raise your profits, increase sales. You make decisions very quickly because you feel like this is my goal. When you have 10, 20, 30 people working together on a problem, you will invariably take longer to come to a decision. To solve that little problem on delayed decision-making, you need actually leadership. So any collaborative model needs to have a group of people who, at this point at least, say, we are going to be the leaders and we're going to help the group come to a conclusion on where we need to go. The second issue with collaborative models is each of you has individual goals when you're working on your own. How do you then bring it together for this common objective? That is kind of solved when you know the big problems we have in the world. So if you look at climate change, you know we all have to play a part in it. Just understanding that we play a part, how do we play that part, helps you identify your role in that part. The third thing, which is a challenge for collaborative models, is we have ambitious goals. The problem with really audacious, ambitious goals is you always feel overwhelmed. So again, the solution that I will give you an example when we worked in sanitation was to break it down into 10 different parts and say, in the next 3 months, I will, as a group, we will try to achieve these 2 things. If you achieve it or not, at least you know that was my milestone at a short level. And why this is important is we as human beings get a sense, like it's your dopamine receptors, right? So you achieve one small goal, you feel good about it, even though you know you have not achieved the larger goal. So keep in mind, no matter what work you're doing, just find 2 things you think you want to do in the next 6 months. And if you achieve it, you know you've achieved it, you feel good. If you didn't, you know you didn't do it for this reason. But if you set yourself to say, in 3 years, I'm going to solve one big problem, it is incredibly hard and it puts a lot of pressure in the way you start thinking about each of these solutions and problems, okay? Now, those were some of the challenges. What I would genuinely want to say is what key takeaways I can give you, at least as a group, from my experience. And again, I feel it's odd as an individual to talk about why collaboration is important because it should be me with 2, 3 other people. But even given the default, let's just start on a very basic level. I think as human beings, if you really think about it, we are nothing but atoms that are being combined, right? So if you really break it down, what's an atom? It's protons, electrons, and neutrons. And we always in science say they combine to form an atom. Combine is the same word as collaborate. So if these 3 things collaborate to form one atom and that one atom collaborates to form us as individuals, we should know that collaboration is in our DNA. It is our default mode. We always need to realize that we're not individuals. We don't operate as one entity. We actually operate in existence with the universe and the world around us. So at a basic level, that should be the first thing we understand. And we take that as something that we carry forward. And Then I'll say a couple of other things. I saw a show recently called Social Dilemma, which is about the social network. Even there, if you've ever seen it, it paints a picture that is quite bleak. But at the very end, the architects of the problem, they come back to saying the only way we solve this problem is through collective will. Again, they're using the same words, meaning you cannot solve a problem unless everybody is invested in finding the solution, because that actually takes care of one big issue. In the corporate sector, be it, and I've heard this a lot with startups, being Uber, even Swiggy, they use this word called pressure is a privilege. Now that's a great line. What collaboration helps you do is it removes a burden of pressure, but keeps the privilege. And that is very important to realize, because when you're trying to solve problems, you feel the pressure. You don't see it as a privilege, I'm solving something. But when you're all together, then it's fantastic, because you don't fail individually. You fail collectively, or you succeed collectively. And I think that's really, really important to keep in mind when we're talking about what it means to work together and what it means to bring each other's kind of expertise into one particular way of contributing to a problem, right? So it's like a puzzle, and that's how I would look at it. And I know I don't have too much more time, so I'll just kind of end with a quote which I had seen, which I thought was really important. And I'm sorry I have to read it because I haven't had a chance to really memorize it. We cannot live with each other at the exclusion of each other, for then the richness of our shared experience will die an impoverished death. And in the dying, it will kill the dreams that we started fighting for. And please keep that in mind as my takeaway, because on a simple level, you either collaborate or you die. Thank you.